How's it going, everybody? Hoping you're all having a great and wonderful day. Thank you for stopping by and checking out Beneath the Bark Joinery's YouTube page. My name's Stefan, and yeah, that's about that. But today, we're going to get into pouring the actual epoxy, what to do if your previous casting had already dried, how to go about pouring multiple layers, and what procedures to take. Once your epoxy is all ready to be poured, the bubbles had been popped, it's stirred correctly, mixed, and ready to go, you can begin your pour. Start at the far edge and try to make it one fluid motion of a pour. Just one all the way down. Try to make it a little heavy. That's why it's nice to make a little extra. That way you know you have enough. Worst case, you can always go back and fill it up like I'm doing here. You can go back up and around where you missed if there's not any epoxy, but remember this is also self-leveling. And with the remainder of the epoxy in the bottom, I always fill the voids and cracks in my wood. If the voids are bigger, then you might need to mix some more to fill them up. And get that torch out. And when you're torching, you want to stay in a fluid motion like this. I did a close-up. But move fast and hit all the spots. Make sure to get around the bark and everything to get all those bubbles. Remember to read the directions with your epoxy, but you typically have a half-hour working time to torch it with intervals of 10 minutes, so 3 times in a half an hour to get the bubbles out with the torch. If you poured your last layer of epoxy and that previous layer had already cured, well, there's no problem with that at all. All you have to do is sand it. It's called a mechanical bond. You sand it so that way the next layer bonds correctly to it and adheres to it and doesn't fall off or anything, and there's no worry that it's not going to actually bond and hold tight. So you have to actually sand the whole entire piece anywhere you want to put epoxy, even on the bark, everywhere. Get it fully sanded, and then you are now ready. Well, then that gets it ready to pour epoxy. Here I am just sanding, and I use a little block because it's flat, it's easy to get in the cracks there, it's easy to get the bark. And remember to wear a face mask of some sort when you're sanding because you don't want to be breathing in that epoxy dust, wood dust, anything like that. But make sure to get it thoroughly all the way through. And like I said, that's called a mechanical bond that is made by you. You've got everything sanded the way you like. Get some compressed air or air duster or whatever it might be. I mean, that's a couple dollars at Staples. But that's your best bet if you don't have an air hose. And then get some denatured alcohol or mineral spirits to pour that on the rag. And then wipe off the entire piece, the epoxy, the wood, everything. Get it all nice and clean. Continue to pour on the rag and fold over to a clean piece again so you're not just wiping the existing dust back onto it. The means of this is to get all of the dust onto the rag, and the mineral spirits or the denatured alcohol collects it there. Once everything is thoroughly cleaned off and you are happy with it and you make sure there's no dust or debris on the epoxy or the wood, you can now pour your final coat. Again, start from one end and pour kind of heavy and work it all the way down to the other end. And what we had just seen was a mechanical bond, which is when you manually sand the epoxy. That way the new layer of epoxy correctly adheres to it. Those sanding scratches allows that epoxy to get into the other epoxy. Now, if you are going to pour another layer of epoxy on an existing layer and it's still tacky to touch and it's been about 3 to 5 hours in between coats, you can just pour straight over and not have to worry about it. That's a different process. This is if your epoxy is already cured. I want to thank all you folks for watching, and if you want to subscribe, leave a comment, any suggestions, any questions, any input at all, let me know and I will take that into consideration and we'll be using the next video. Like I said before, I split my segments into smaller videos so it's easier to digest the information and get into more detail. Next video coming out, it's going to be about getting this tabletop out of the form, sanding it down, routing the tabletop down with the router sled, and buffing, polishing, getting it ready for the customer.